It's your Wednesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Final show of the week for those of you scoring at home. Not sure if I mentioned this yet, but taking Thursday and Friday off. Kind of not a dead spot so much in the sports schedule, but a little bit of a lull. No Wild right now. No NFL this weekend as we get ready for the Super Bowl. So I'm going to catch a little time, get away for a little bit, and be back at it Monday with Patrick Royce. But before that, got a great show today. Of course, Chip Scoggins from the Star Tribune joins me here in a little bit to touch on a lot of different things. A lot of Vikings talk still. Fascinated by that team's offseason, but Chip and I got into a bunch of different stuff. I posed to him a question. I want you guys to think about how you would answer this before Chip does. The year is 2028. It's actually 2023, but imagine it's 2028. So we're 5 years into the future. You have traveled to that point in time, and you've met someone there who, is living in 2028, and they tell you that a Minnesota team, either the Wild, Timberwolves, Vikings, or Twins, and again, not to exclude anybody, but these are the four teams we're dealing with right now. Those four teams, one of those four teams has won a championship since the time that you traveled from 2023 to 2028. Which team has won that championship in the next 5 years? Who do you think it is? Chip had an answer. I put him on the spot, and I want to know what you guys think as well. Think about what your answer will be, because Chip's answer will be coming up here in just a little while. Got some Gophers women's basketball thoughts and answering a reader-listener question about the NFL draft. First, though, what did I miss? Let's start with Minnesota United and this kind of weird space they're in with their star, Emanuel Reynoso, best player on the team. I know they got some good players besides Reynoso, but he is really the engine that's been driving this team over the past few years. Two-time Major League Soccer All-Star. Hasn't reported to camp yet. It's an interesting dynamic right now, because here we are, it's February 1st. Training for everybody else started on January 6th. I can't help but notice that was more than 3 weeks ago. Season starts February 25th. It's really early. The MLS season goes on forever. We talked about that. That's, it's kind of is what it is. So we're kind of at the halfway point right now between when training started and when the season begins, and still Reynoso has not shown up to join his teammates with training. Now, Adrian Heath, Loon's manager, addressed this a couple days ago. It was an optimistic quote, but didn't necessarily leave me feeling all that optimistic about the overall situation. The quote from Adrian Heath to reporters in a video conference call when they were doing some training down in Orlando was, "We're probably a bit more hopeful in the next few days regarding Reynoso coming back to the Loons and starting training here. We spoke to Ray yesterday," so I'm assuming that was Sunday since this was on Monday, and he feels hopefully we can sort this out and we can get him back here. There's one or two issues he needs to sort out at home. So I know there's all sorts of legal entanglements, from arrest for his December 2021 arrest when he was accused of making threats with a gun and beating a minor in his hometown in Argentina. That was his hometown paper that has reported that he could face trial on that. I'm reading from Jerry Zagoda's updated story. He's been linked to transfers to various different places around the country, around the globe, really. Different places he might go to play. So that, combined with him not being here, does give you the impression of something being amiss, more than just the trial here or whatever's going on with his legal situation. I don't know what exactly he wants, what exactly is going on here, but it's feeling a little bit like, I don't know if we have a perfect comparison, but it's feeling a little bit like Stefan Diggs when he was just kind of done at a place. And I don't know if that's how Reynoso's feeling. Maybe he's just kind of taking his sweet time because he's got leverage. Who knows what the deal is exactly here. Maybe he will be here by the end of the week. He'll start training. He'll play. Everything will be okay. But something just feels off here. Starting to feel like he's maybe not the world's greatest teammate if he's not here right now. Starting to feel like he is going to reach a point where he is more trouble than he's worth, and that's the Stefan Diggs comparison right there. Diggs, great player, went to Buffalo and has done great there. It was a great trade for the Vikings because they got Justin Jefferson, the draft pick they paid Justin Jefferson. Everybody's happy, but you remember that situation became untenable. He became more trouble than he was worth because of everything that was going on off the field. So is Reynoso going to get to that point? I don't know. I'm just saying I don't like this situation. I don't like a guy who's been out for almost exactly half of training camp now. This isn't Brett Favre who gets to decide when he comes to training camp or when he doesn't come to training camp. This is a player in the prime of his career, the best player on a team that is counting on him. So I will be eagerly awaiting the resolution of this, as I imagine the Loons are as well, to see what exactly is going on and what exactly comes of the Emanuel Reynoso situation.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is playday.
Let's bring in Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune columnist, joins me here on Daily Delivery. He's a fairly frequent guest. Chip, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
I am good. A lot of times when I have you on, I've got one specific thing I want to ask you about, but I feel like we're kind of at a point in, whether it's seasons or off seasons where it's kind of like a lot of little things that I want to get you on. And one of those things, I think we start with the NFL. We've talked some NFL already this week with Andrew Kramer, but I'm just kind of curious of your impressions, just kind of watching the entire playoffs play out now, knowing what we know. The top seeds are in the Super Bowl. What's the gap to you between the top teams and the Vikings, who obviously were a 13-4 team, a playoff team, but how far away are they from being one of these, even one of the final four teams that were competing to be in the Super Bowl?
Watching those games this weekend, it felt like they are a long ways away. And it's weird to say for a team that won 13 games and won their division and got into the playoffs. But when you watch the defense that is on display this past weekend in the championship games, they're not close. They're just not. They have a lot of work to make up ground to those teams on the defensive side. I do wonder how they're going to be able to make this work. Kwesi, the new GM, with the constraints they have with the salary cap, with not knowing, what's the exit strategy with Kirk Cousins. Do you write it out this year? Do you do another short extension to give you some relief? But those defenses that were on display shows you how far away they really are.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of where I'm at too, and it becomes complicated. It's a complicated off season for them. I think it became, and I've talked about this a couple different times, I think it became more complicated because they went 13-4, right? If this would have been a 9-8 team or an 8-9 team, kind of like they've been the past few years, it would have been a lot easier to say, okay, we've been doing this for a while. It's time to really, maybe not tear it down to the studs because you still got some people you want to build around, but a rebuild becomes easier to fathom or sell when you've been mediocre for so long. And they played, 13-4 was their record. I don't think they played like a 13-4 team, but it does make it a little bit more of a challenge to, say, well, we're going to rebuild off of a 13-win season. That just doesn't happen very often. I think, quarterback and defense are going to have been the question for a while now. My preference, I think, is, and it's kind of the do nothing preference, but I kind of feel like the way you handle Cousins right now is he plays this year, but you don't extend him. And I know that's going to, counts $36 million on the cap, but that this year is kind of about building the bridge to whatever's next. And I just don't feel like he's part of that long-term vision.
Well, I don't think he's part of the long-term vision. And you're right, it is complicated because I think they have to look at this realistically. This season was an outlier.
Yes.
you're not going to win. You're not going to go 11-0 in one-score games. That's a complete outlier. You're not typically going to win 13 games with one of the worst defenses in the NFL. That typically doesn't happen. And so I think they have to look at this with a realistic viewpoint that they have to turn over that defense and they have to figure out a succession plan for Kirk Cousins. The problem they have, Mike, is typically if you want that guy to be your franchise quarterback, you're probably going to need to be in the top 10, right?
Yes.
Doesn't mean you can't get him at 20, 22, but you're better off trying to get into that top 10. I just don't see, with the talent they have on offense, this being a 4-win team where you bottom out and you get that into that range. Now, can you trade and do things to try to move up? Sure. But that has complications too. And so I guess I wouldn't mind if you could get 2 more years out of Cousins and you select your quarterback, not this draft, but next draft, and you have him take a redshirt season, so to speak.
Right.
And then you're turning it over. If you just let this play out and have a lame duck year with Cousins, you better have a pretty good idea what you're going to do next year, because I don't think you want another bridge quarterback. They've tried that route a couple times. You would like to find, ideally, if you could get strike gold in the NFL, get a standout quarterback who's on a rookie deal, and then you can build up everything else. That's not always possible, but we've seen how that pays off for teams when they're able to do it. But I guess I don't know that Cousins is ready to hit a cliff, but I don't know that you're going to win a championship with him either. And so if they had to go 2 more years with him to buy some time to get that plan, to find the guy that they want, I think I would be okay with that.
Yeah, I get it. It's just you're not going to win a championship with him, especially not with, if you look at his timeline, if you look at the defense where it's at, like you would need an awfully special defense in order to win a championship, I think, with Kirk Cousins. And obviously you've got some offensive pieces, and it's funny, like I talked about this on Tuesday's show, like, there's tools where you can go through and you can make all these cuts and see how it impacts the salary cap, and all of a sudden, hey, they're $30 million under the cap once you do this, and this. But then, you also don't have any linebackers. You don't have any, it's like looking at the defense next year, it's fine to think, oh yeah, maybe get rid of Eric Kendricks. Hey, Zadarius Smith, thanks for the time here. It was a good, half a season until it wasn't great. But that doesn't change the fact that once those guys are gone, who else plays? The defense is not going to be good unless they really it's something extraordinary happens.
And I wrote about this a couple weeks ago, Michael, at the end of the season, that after that, the draft helped me at the year 16, where they had Trey Waynes 1,
15,
15, Daniil Hunter 2, and Eric Kendricks 3. They have whiffed so often on the defensive side of the ball. They've had so many empty drafts on the defensive side that it's easy to say, get rid of this guy because he makes too much money. Well, what's your alternative?
Right.
I mean, they don't have this young nucleus of players waiting in the wings to take over. They just don't. And so they've had too many empty drafts. And that's where not only does Kwesi have to figure out the salary cap and what to do with Cousins and quarterback, he better be a pretty shrewd drafter, because they cannot have any more empty drafts on the defensive side of the ball, because they have to turn over that side of the ball and get younger and faster. Yeah.
And the not so great news is they have 4 draft picks this year, a first, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. I mean, it's going to take a little rabbit out of the hat for them to be 13 wins, certainly. I don't even think that's a realistic proposition unless you're counting on something that I'm not counting on. But even to get back to 9 or 10 wins feels like it's going to be an accomplishment next year if they are able to do it.
With a much tougher schedule.
Yes.
Yes. I think they play all 4 of the final 4 teams are on the schedule next year. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right. And, I don't think they're going to duck all these quarterbacks. And they, they had what amounted to, I think, 9 home games, 7 true road games, and then the neutral site game this past year. So a lot of those things added up to 13-4. And that's not to take anything away from the things they did to do that for themselves, making those plays in the fourth quarter when they needed to, winning those close games. But there's like about 5 or 6 points where you just look and say, that's not sustainable. And how does that play out next year? Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. They've got to shed at least $22-23 million before the start of the league year. And,
well, I don't think Adam Thielen will be back.
No,
you can't pay him 19. He can't have a 19 million cap hit. Dalvin Cook, they had the 28th fewest carries in the NFL. It doesn't make sense to pay a running back $14 million in this system. No. I don't think Dalvin Cook's back. And then, Eric Kendricks, are you ready to turn over there and find someone younger? So I think they can do that. Here's the thing. We saw this week that the salary cap is going to go up quite a bit.
Yeah, to 224.
Yeah, and that's going to help them significantly. But Justin Jefferson, a starting point, is going to be $30 million a year with his new deal. And Christian Darrisaw, he keeps developing like he's on the pace that he is. He's going to command a big time salary. Probably a top 5 salary for a left tackle. So they have some big ticket contracts coming down the way, and so that's where ideally you would be able to get cheaper at quarterback without suffering a massive drop off in production. And so that's where you have to. Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell have to be right on that, on that one position.
Yep. I got a question for you that kind of gets to the heart of a lot of the major teams in this town. It's something I think about from time to time. Let's say it's the year 2028. Okay. And we're all older. We're all 5 years older. Apologize.
I'm retired by then. I'm retired.
Congratulations on your retirement. No, you're not that old, Chip. Come on. But I'm going to tell you right now that one of the Vikings, Twins, Wild, and Timberwolves has won a championship here by the year 2028. Which one do you think it is?
This is fairy tale, right? They don't win.
I'm not like, we don't win championships, but and I'm not a time traveler. I'm not clairvoyant, but I'm telling you, this has happened. Something has happened where one of these teams has won a championship. Which team do you think I am talking about?
I would say Wild. Just because I think the parity in that league brings doesn't put everybody on equal footing, but once you get to the playoffs, a team can get hot. They'll be out of their salary cap hell by then.
Yes. Eventually,
Eventually, you would hope that I do think they have some young guys in the pipeline now that you're talking 7 or 5 years down the road, but Kirill will still be in his prime, I would think. Hopefully, Billy Guerin is able to build up the roster with, with more money to spend. I think that's probably the most likely. All those teams have superstars. Young talent. I mean, Twins. We could say Buxton when he plays, but
Correa. And
Correa, yeah, and I think Correa will still be. He'll be in his prime still. The Vikings. It's so hard to project the NFL who's going to be good and bad. From year to year, and the Wolves are the Wolves.
I know.
So I'll go with the Wild. Although I do, you're talking about Anthony Edwards to be 26 then. Yeah. 26 years old, right? Yeah. Which is crazy to say. He's what he's doing right now. He's 21. He's still, still in the early stage of his career. But I'll go Wild. I would pick Wild.
I can go with that. I think the parity of the NHL is always a good starting point if there's not an obvious other answer, and then you factor in Kaprizov and how special he is. I'll buy that. I think a sneaky answer might be the Twins too, just because I feel like they're kind of starting to build a base here. They just need that one pitcher, that one starting pitcher, and they've been searching for it forever. And a lot of teams are searching for it forever, but that one guy that just kind of takes your rotation to another level where it's clear that is your ace, your stopper. If they were ever able to either acquire that person, develop that person, maybe that person's already on the roster. I don't know yet. I don't see that person yet. But if they were ever able to get that, it does feel like they might have the potential to have a year that ends like that. But again, it's a lot of conjecture at this point.
Yeah. And that's been the big draw, big strike against this regime. Derek Falvey, they just have not developed the pitching in the way that we were led to believe it was going to happen when they came on here. And they've acquired some guys that have, elevated the pitching staff when they're healthy.
Every member of the rotation was traded for.
That's right. But that's to me, that's the frustrating thing. We can talk about having to trade Luis Arraez is I understand, the logic because you have a plethora of corner players and you need pitching. But the fact that they haven't developed their pitching, put them in a spot where they had to trade one of their most dynamic and popular players to get pitching. And that's the frustration part to me. And their unwillingness to go out and spend big money on pitching. That's just not what this regime likes to do. But the fact that they haven't done that or won't do that put them in position where they had to trade Arraez.
Right. I mean, and you could have imagined them reallocating money in a certain way if the Correa situation had gone, more according to the plan of him signing somewhere else. But when he came back to them, I guess I can't fault them for what they ended up doing. Yeah, I think the Arraez trade is probably a frustration point for a lot of fans, just from the standpoint of people like watching him play. Like if you're a fan, like even if you can like intellectually wrap your head around, they needed pitching. Yeah, they got a guy, Pablo Lopez, who could be pretty good. Luis Arraez was a batting champion. And these days, the value placed on that is kind of debatable or, is different from person to person. But if you're just a fan, if you like watching Twins baseball, that's a hard one to take.
Yeah, because it's they put themselves in the position where it's either or. You either have him or you're lacking in pitching. You would hope that they would be in a position where it's both. You can keep Arraez and still upgrade your pitching staff, through one way or another. But again, because they haven't done a good enough job developing them so far, that they've had to build their starting rotation by getting guys from other staffs, by trading away assets to get those guys. And so that to me is the disappointing thing. And Arraez is one of those guys you love to watch hit. I mean, he's entertaining when he's, all the gyrations and all the stuff he does in there, and just a professional hitter in a time when it's feast or famine, it's strikeout or home run. It's nice to see a guy take a professional at bat. It
is nice to have a little variety in the lineup. They don't seem like they always have a lot of that. Chip, you brought up Anthony Edwards. Maybe that's a place for us to finish. He was good again the other night, but they lost in overtime. Some turnovers from Ant in the last couple of games that hurt. What did you make of him not taking questions post game? That was an interesting one because he's never one, doesn't usually seem to be one who's at a loss for words, but he seemed frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is a guy who was frustrated. I'm guessing probably because of the turnovers, and that's part of his evolution, Mike. I mean, when you're the guy, this is going to be, you're going to get a lot of questions and you're going to be the face of it. And I think he's really done a commendable job once Towns went out filling into that franchise guy.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
He's become a star. I mean, you don't see as many lulls in his game. You see him being assertive more and not having those kind of off nights. Defensively, he's been good. He wants the ball in his hands. So now, to me, how does Towns assimilate back if and when he comes back? That to me, because I'm sorry, this is Anthony Edwards' team now.
It is. And I don't know where Towns fits in because, Monday night game aside where they didn't really close how they wanted to. And we all have our feelings about D'Angelo Russell, and he did not have a good game the other night, but he's been largely very good. And kind of that starting closing lineup with Edwards and D'Lo and Kyle Anderson and Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert. Unless the other team goes with five non-centers and Gobert gets played off the floor like he should have been the other night, that's been a pretty good closing lineup, and it gives him a certain amount of versatility. And Cat's a versatile enough player, but it's hard for me to imagine where Kyle Anderson's minutes go specifically when Towns comes back.
Well, and Kyle Anderson has been terrific. What a great pickup for them. Yeah, I mean, do you want him playing a lot less?
I don't.
And do you want Anthony Edwards deferring to Cat at this point?
No, I don't.
And D'Lo, listen, I'm among the many that said they should trade him. He's been hot for a while now. And he had a tough night against Sacramento the other night, but he's played well. And maybe that just elevates his trade value. I don't know, but he has been good for him. So I'm curious to see how this works because, listen, Towns is still a terrific player.
Yeah.
He's still, a big part, I would think, of what they're trying to do. And you want to see more of him with Gobert. But it has the potential to be clunky when he comes back.
Oh, yeah. I think it absolutely will be. There was when he left, so why would it be any different when he comes back?
And is he willing to kind of fit in, or does he want to come back and be the guy again?
And when is he coming back? Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing. That's why I said if and when. It's been so quiet and hush hush from the team that you don't really know, and he hasn't been around, so it's hard to know.
Yeah.
What exactly? I know Chris Hine from our paper had the thing from the social media post that he
Twitch
made.
Stream, yeah.
Which he made it sound like he was a little frustrated with how this thing has been portrayed.
Yes.
That the 4 week narrative got out there, and it's clearly not 4 weeks.
Yeah,
so,
but it's been more like 9 or 10 weeks at this point. So it's
So I'm going to operate under assumption that he is coming back at some point here after the All-Star break, and then it's just going to be fascinating to see. Is it a reset? Is it a new team, and he has to figure it out? I think it's going to be fascinating as they're fighting for playoff position in this crowded Western Conference field because you can go from 4 to 10 in a couple 1
or 2 games.
Yeah, so it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, trade deadline is a week from Thursday. That will be another interesting point. Who stays? Who goes? Is it kind of a quiet deadline? Do they kind of stuck and not going to make anything major happen right now? We'll see. We'll see what happens, and we will be there to talk about it as always. Chip, appreciate the time as always. Anything else going on that you want to plug? Yeah, so we have a feature running this weekend. As of right now, we'll make sure it still does. But Sunday on one of the best high school basketball players in this state in an unlikely location, the Iron Range, a small town of Cherry, Minnesota. The player's name is Isaac Asuma. He's a junior. He has offers from the Gophers, Iowa State, Nebraska, and is just a terrific point guard. I went out and spent the day with his family and watched him play a game with Aaron Levinsky, our photojournalist, and we'll have a nice feature on him and his family coming up. Always look forward to your bigger stuff. And of course, whenever you are working with Aaron Levinsky, should be great stuff. So look for that hopefully in this weekend's papers. Chip, appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you, brother.
Good stuff from Chip Scoggins. Is always looking forward to his story over the weekend. Always good when he and Aaron Levinsky pair up, like I said a little while ago. So look for that in your Star Tribune and on StarTribune.com. Chip and I talked about the Vikings. We talked a lot of Vikings this week. I'm going to talk a little bit more Vikings right now because I got an email from a longtime reader and listener, podcast listener, Craig, who wants to know, he said, I'm a lifelong Vikings fan, proudly and with much frustration. Still has season tickets at US Bank Stadium, even though he lives in LA right now. He says the Access Vikings podcast helps keep him connected to the team, but he emailed me and said, my proposed topic is trading down in the draft. I'd love to hear your perspective and see some stats on whether it's an effective strategy. My instinct is that it's not. As we see over and over, it's a league driven by impact players, and if you can have a couple handfuls of them on rookie contracts, you're in great shape. So if I were the GM, I would rather have a few higher picks. I'd love to hear a show about this. Maybe we can dig deeper into this on Access Vikings in a month or two once we get closer to the NFL draft. For now, Craig, I would say this. I think it kind of depends on the situation. There's data that suggests trading down in the NFL draft is a good idea, especially if you have a very, very high pick, which the Vikings don't have this year, by the way. They're down in the 20s, but when you have a very, very high pick, you can oftentimes extract a lot of value from that pick and get more value around the board. So it kind of goes both ways. It kind of depends on what you need, and it often depends on how you end up drafting, what kind of impact you get out of those positions. Now, the Vikings are in an interesting position this year where they only have 4 draft picks. a first rounder, a third rounder, a fourth rounder, and a fifth rounder. And they might be tempted to, because they're probably going to have a lot of holes on their roster, they might be tempted to, take that first round pick and turn it into a couple of, high picks or decent picks still, and add some more there. Try to beef up their draft class. Now they might add 1 or 2 picks in compensatory picks along the way. It might get bigger already, and they might end up with more picks than that, especially if they make a trade. Is that the right idea? I don't know. Depends on what you can get at that spot. Depends kind of on what your philosophy is. But we saw Rick Spielman do it time and time again. He'd trade down, accumulate those late round picks. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah kind of followed that trend last year, traded out of the number 12 spot all the way down to 32 to draft Louis Cine. Was that a good idea? We still don't really know. Louis Cine, was injured in his rookie season, but he could still be a very good player. We'll find out about that. Philosophy-wise, I think it kind of depends on what you think, what you can make of those picks. I would say this. I don't think there's much value in trading down beyond pick number 100 or so. I think there's kind of a lot of value in the draft up to about pick 100 usually, and after that it starts to fall off. You're really not going to find a lot of players beyond that. You're going to get lucky sometimes. You're going to scout well. Someone's going to, be a late bloomer, something like that, develop later in life. But I think by and large, if you're trading down into the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, which was the complaint about Rick Spielman a lot, that's not too advantageous. But if you're doing it and moving around the board, giving yourself a chance at more of those top 100 players, I think there is still some benefit to it, even if you are sometimes giving yourself less of a chance at those very, very high-impact players at the top. So I guess the jury is probably still out. There is data, Craig, to say that maybe it's a good idea, but I think sometimes it's case by case. Let's finish with the cooler. It's going to be an interesting game for the Gophers women's basketball team Wednesday night against Indiana. Indiana, one of the top teams in the country, and they added Sarah Scalia, Minnesota native, played for the Gophers early in her career for the first 3 years, transferred out of Minnesota essentially because she wanted to go play for a winner and compete for a championship. It's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing, because if she was still here, I'm sure the Gophers would have a much better chance at winning this year. But I don't think anybody's fooling themselves into thinking that this would be a team that's ranked in the top 5 of the country like Indiana is right now. So this is a case, I think, where the point I want to make is this is the kind of transfer you never would have seen before the transfer portal, I don't think. You wouldn't have seen someone leaving their hometown team, going to another Big Ten school, being eligible to play immediately and having this kind of impact with Indiana, where she's either been starting or being a key reserve for Indiana. She was a high-volume scorer with the Gophers, a good player for the Gophers, second team All Big Ten. She would have helped them this year. This is the kind of player that typically would have stuck around at her school for all 4 years, his or her school, depending on whether we're talking about men's or women's sports. But now that the portal's here, different things are happening, and that is what has happened with the Gophers. It's going to be an interesting game to watch just to see the reception, see how this all goes. I'm sure it'll be cordial and everything like that, but I'm sure deep down this one really hurt Lindsay Whalen and the Gophers, and that's one they wish they could have had back. And it's just like she said, the way that things go in college basketball with the portal these days. And that is it for me today. That's it for me for the week. Like I said at the start of the show, taking a couple days off. Back at it Monday with Royce. Enjoy your long break from Daily Delivery, but don't make it too long. Come back on Monday, catch up on any shows you missed, and we'll see you in a few days.